Good stuff. 650, 650 there. 700. 700 here. 750, 750, 750 here. 800, 800, 850.
Hey everyone, it's Chris from Third Coast Craftsman, and I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to wait until the end to find out how much that cutting board went for. So a few months ago, my son's kindergarten teacher asked me if I would be willing to make something to donate to the school's annual fundraiser. And of course I said I would, and I decided to make them a nice end grain cutting board, which would be a nice, easy, simple project to knock out. But then in my typical fashion, I started to look around online and I got really inspired by some really cool designs out there. And I ended up seeing this pattern called the Helical Weave by Feldhaus Family Woodworking, and I just knew I had to build it. It's literally one of the most beautiful designs that I've ever seen on a cutting board, but it also looked like one of the most complicated to build. But luckily Ryan over at Feldhaus put out a set of plans on how to build it, and since I was in a bit of a time crunch and there was no way I'd be able to get basically a PhD in mathematics to be able to come up with something like this, I went ahead and I purchased Ryan's plans and jumped into trying to build this cutting board. I'll leave a link to his plans down below, and I can vouch that they're really well done and they come with a nice instructional video, so give it a shot. Don't be scared. If I can do it, you can do it too. But this is the type of project that you do need certain woodworking machinery like a joiner, a planer, a bandsaw, table saw, and even a drum sander. They don't need to be giant heavy duty ones, but they do need to be really well tuned and accurate for a project like this. So I'm using black walnut, Meranti, which is also known as Philippine mahogany, Okume, which is what they use to make a lot of marine grade plywoods, and maple as my light colored accent stripping. And what you've been watching me do for the last 2 minutes is dimensioning all this rough lumber into nice, flat, square, usable material. Once everything is dimensioned, I'm gonna rip them all the same width. And normally I would use a table saw, but for this, my walnut boards were just barely wide enough to get 2 boards out of them. So I decided to use my bandsaw to rip them because the bandsaw blade curve is much thinner than the table saw. And honestly, any excuse I have to use this bandsaw, I usually jump on it. It's relatively new to me. It's a 100-year-old Oliver 36-inch bandsaw, super fun to run, and so any excuse that I have to use it, I pretty much do. Now that all my stock is the same width, I need to resaw the different species to their required thicknesses. Well, I just ruined a $50 bandsaw blade. I apparently didn't set my bottom guide tight enough, and this guide bearing pushed back, allowing the teeth in the bottom to go within these metal guide blocks, and essentially just overheated and sheared off all the teeth like in an instant. And so I was pushing it through and I was like, man, that cut's terrible and it looks like it's burning. So it looks like we're going over to the smaller bandsaw. I just did a test piece on here and it's working pretty good. So back to resawing. I left about a 1/16 of an inch of material when resawing all my pieces, and then I used the drum sander to sneak up on my final thickness. I got good news. I just picked up my workshop partner from school, and he's gonna help me run a bunch of these pieces through the drum sander, get ready to glue them all together, right? Yeah. So you're gonna be on that end, and I'm gonna put boards through this end, and then you'll pick them up for me, okay? All right. Okay, all my pieces are dead on and I'm ready for my first of many glue ups. A couple of crucial things are a way to apply glue quickly. A glue roller worked really good for this, and a lot of clamps and culls. I like these aluminum bar clamps from Rockler for my base because then I could clamp my culls, which were made out of angle iron, to those to make sure everything was really flat, and then I just applied as many clamps as I could fit on there. I clean up the glue squeeze out, re-establish square on the joiner, cut my ends flush, lay out my next cuts, which are all going to be at an angle, and then I'm going to get back to work on the bandsaw. Hey everyone, while I'm cutting these boards, I wanted to let you know that I just opened registration for timber framing classes here on my property that will be going on in August and September of 2023. I've teamed up with Shelter Institute, which is a timber framing school and engineering and construction firm out in Maine, to create this really cool opportunity where the students can come and take a 5-day in-person timber framing class with me, and then you'll also get access to Shelter Institute's 12-hour online timber framing class and their SIP panel class for free. So you'll have the benefit of the in-person class where you're going to learn how to sharpen tools, proper tool uses and techniques, laying out and cutting different types of joinery with hand tools, and at the end of it we get to assemble and raise the timber frame. And with all that you're going to learn jammed into 1 week, it's really nice to have access to those online classes to be able to go back and refresh your skills. Plus they come with a free set of plans and cut sheets for a 24 by 24 timber frame. So if you're interested in learning more, I'll have some information and links down in the description. It's super important to be dead on your lines for these next steps, so I stayed about a 30-second back when cutting on the bandsaw, and I used my hand plane to remove the rough saw marks and sneak up to my line so that I was perfectly dead on. With this glue up, I need to sandwich 3 thin pieces between the 2 angled pieces that I just got done working on. I'm only going to work on 3 staves at a time now to make sure that I get things clamped up before the glue starts setting up. With the angled cuts of these pieces, they're going to want to slide on me, so I make sure that I can apply plenty of culling pressure to keep them flat before I add too much side clamping pressure. So now we're on to cutting the second weave, and this is kind of one of the more scary parts. I really sat down and tried to line everything up to make sure everything was going to come out good. I had to change the angle on here a little bit because when I re-squared and redimensioned these things, you know, things move and change a little bit. So I think I have it set pretty good, and hopefully if there's any variances later on, because they're not all exactly 100% dead on, that I'll still be able to line them up and arrange them nicely later on. So second set coming up. Now I need to cut a 45-degree angle off each corner of all my pieces before I can do the next glue up. All right, now we're really starting to get somewhere. After I glue all my pieces together and plane the block nice and flat, I'm gonna cross cut 1 3/4 inch strips on the table saw using a table saw sled. I use a clamp handle tightened to my fence to get really nice repeatable cuts. After all my strips are cut, I can lay them out and flip them on their sides for the big moment of truth to see how good or bad I did and if everything is lining up nicely. So after the flip, I was very happy with how everything lined up. There was just one row that was off just a little bit, and I was able to take it over to the table saw and shave off just a 32nd of an inch, and that ended up getting it to line up darn near perfectly. So I was really happy with the results and able to glue it together. All right, so on this first glue up for the trim that's going around the cutting board, I had to kind of cut these and make these strips. They're all end grain, so they would all expand and contract properly. You don't want to put long grain next to end grain. And so I had to cut these with a chisel and router plane and just get it dead on. And this is the first round, and we'll do another layer of walnut and maple on the outside of that. So this is going to be tricky. So I'm getting pretty excited at this point. It's looking amazing. And after I flatten it on the drum sander, I sand up to 320 on the random orbital sander. And then I'm gonna cut back the walnut strips a little bit just because I think it's gonna look a little bit better with a thinner strip of walnut all the way around the perimeter. So this is what truly makes this cutting board so special. I asked the school if I could bring the cutting board into the kindergarten class and have all the kindergartners sign the back of it. The cutting board is part of a little kitchen bundle for the auction that represented the kindergarten class. Each grade has their own little auction bundle, so I thought by adding the kids' names to the back, it would really make it that much more special. And it was honestly really cute watching all those kids sign their names. Now back at the shop, I made up a quick jig to be able to route out a juice groove in the top. This was super nerve-wracking because any mistake here, and if that router got away from me and ran outside my juice groove line, I was going to be in deep trouble. Luckily, with the utmost in concentration and just 2 heart attacks later, I got it successfully without any trouble. I went back and forth and did a lot of testing on scrap pieces on how to seal and preserve those names without the ink running. The finish that I wanted to use on the top just wasn't working, and after some testing I found out that spray-on poly was going to be my best bet for that bottom. So I applied several coats to the underside, and that side's never going to have food on it or be cut into, so I'm not really worried about it being food safe. It's really no different than a tabletop. For the finish on the top and sides, I'm just going to be using a Butcher Block oil by General Finishes, which is basically just a food grade mineral oil. And after the mineral oil has soaked in, I'll go over the top of it with a nice beeswax paste and buff it with a cloth to give it a really nice sheen.
Pot holders, utensils, and much more. The centerpiece of our project, the handmade end grain, and all that other good stuff. We'll start it again at 200. 200 we got here. 250, holy cow, we gotta go 250. 270, 300, 350, 650, 650 there. 700 here, 750, 650 here, 800, 850, 900, 950, 950 here. 150, 1250 here, 1300 back there. 1300 here. 1350, 1350, 1400, 1400 here, 1400, 1400, 1400. Sold, 1350.